So today we're going to talk about retirement planning. What might an HR professional want to know about this in order to support that transition of employees? Well, I've got an expert who's in the midst of this experience herself. That's all coming up right now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. This is the HR Hub. On the show, we talk about anything related to HR. I encourage you to please subscribe to the show or podcast to keep learning from my guests. And today, I'm happy to welcome back Melanie Peacock. Melanie is a recently retired professor in HR, an HR consultant. She's an HR fellow with CPHR Alberta. She's a keynote speaker, an author of textbooks in HR, and very recently and excitingly, an author of a fiction novel called HR Can Be Murder. You should check that out. It's going to be available. Well, actually, probably already is by the time I publish this. Available on Amazon and all the other places you get your books. Hi, Melanie. How are you?
I'm well, Andrea. Thank you for welcoming me back to the show.
Well, thank you for coming on, and congratulations on your first fiction novel. That's got to be a change from writing textbooks.
Well, it sure is. And thank you for your kind wishes. And, we talked about cliches when we were warming up for today's chat, and I can't resist the truth can be stranger than fiction. So we're going to talk about some truth today.
Yes. And in HR, we see a lot of that kind of thing. So we are going to talk about retirement. Congratulations on that as well. But when I do all of these episodes, and as we were also talking, I'm somewhere in the range of 200 now. I'm not exactly sure, but we just don't talk about helping employees retire. Do you have any idea why that is?
It's very interesting to me that, particularly as a North American culture, but even worldwide, there's a discomfort talking about the end of something. Now, while I'm not equating the two, I would encourage our listeners to think for a moment about the hesitance we have about talking about death. And it just seems like, it's uncomfortable. We have to think about stopping something. How do we approach somebody who might not be comfortable or ready to have those conversations? We want to respect personal boundaries. We want to be professional. We want to be polite. Okay. Now, I'm not, again, I'll stress, not implying that retirement is by any ways or any means death. In fact, I'm a, pardon the pun, living example that it's not. In fact, Andrea, I don't even call it retirement. What I am doing right now is I am reinventing and reimagining. And we'll chat a little bit more about that because there's a lot of trend towards people not completely retiring.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still that hesitancy. To answer your question directly, it's that discomfort. We love to talk about beginnings and the excitement and the build-up and starting something and when people start a new job. But that thought about finishing something, even if it's what's next or even if it's full retirement, there's that discomfort level that we have as a society about endings.
What are the key elements, now that you're in the midst of it, what are the key elements of retirement planning that an organization could help with?
So for the clients I work with and a lot of the research I've done and other of our wonderful HR colleagues that I've spoken to, organizations have become more attuned to, more involved with helping employees with the financial aspects of their retirement planning. Often seminars are offered, or there's resources provided, online links, or ideas of where employees can access retirement financial advice, all sorts of good stuff around that. But Andrea, that's only the smallest part of retirement planning, which seems funny to say, because if you're not financially stable, of course you won't enjoy your retirement. But there's two other key aspects: the emotional side and the health side. So I'm going to talk about those in reverse order. The health side is understanding, of course, we want to keep ourselves physically healthy. So have we thought about that? Have we thought about what we're going to do as our bodies age? Oops, even I've shared with you, like I'm not going gracefully, but all of those creaks and pains, I shut the car door the other day and there was a creak and I was glad it was the door and not my hip. That's the stage I'm at.
Right.
Think about our physical health though, and what kind of resources do we have? And what are we doing as we move into and through retirement to maintain that physical health? But mental health is a key part of health too, which ties that is a nice segue and link to, there's an overlap and interaction to our emotional well-being. So many people, when they leave their full-time permanent roles, they're excited about it initially. There's almost this honeymoon period of retirement or leaving a job.
Yeah.
And then months later, weeks later, sometimes even a year or two later, every person's different, every circumstance. It's like, is that it? Is that all there is? There's a sort of, I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but the little bit of the wah, wah.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what am I doing with my life? Why am I doing this? Like, there's that feeling of emptiness and isolation potentially. So there are things that we can do and we should talk about and help employees prepare. Again, these are uncomfortable conversations for many people and things employers don't want to address. But research shows that people that are mentally and emotionally prepared for retirement and all the joy and opportunity it can bring, whether they continue part-time work, no work at all of the opportunities to volunteer, spend more time with friends and family. But you have to think about that. It doesn't just automatically happen.
So to ask the blunt question, is that the responsibility of the individual employee? Why? What's the business case for an employer to help with that?
The simple answer is it really enhances and impacts an organization's employment brand. How we bring people into the organization, how we conduct recruitment and selection. Are we professional? Are we timely? Are we inviting? Are we onboarding people once we've selected them in a correct and proper and thorough manner? People find out about that. And you go, that's the kind of organization I want to work for. How we help people at the other end of that spectrum will impact people. It's a small world, right? With social media, with ways people converse. I was, just at a large HR event here in the city. People chat and it gets known about what kind of employer an organization is. And that whole lifespan, beginning to when somebody ends their employment with an organization, will impact how people think about that organization. Would I want to work for that? Would I recommend that to somebody else? It also impacts how customers view us. If you're known as a good place to work, you're also viewed as a good place to do business with. So this isn't all about just, let's be nice and it's employees' responsibility. Why should I bother? This makes good business sense.
So what can the organization do in this process? I mean, there's the expression, speaking of cliches, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them to drink. What isn't the employer's responsibility?
So, few things. One, I would recommend that an organization not approach employees and say, okay, so we're assuming that you're going to be retiring on such a date, right? It could be seen as forcing something on an employee. You don't want to ever be accused of any form of termination or potential constructive dismissal. Oh, we just think you're going to be retiring in a year, so we're going to start taking away some of your tasks. And, whoa, I didn't get the memo. What's going on here? You have to be careful. What you can do is offer information, but you're absolutely right. You can't bring employees to the retirement water cooler and force them to drink that Kool-Aid. So you want to be very careful. You also want to not limit the services and the information and the thinking that you're encouraging people to do to only a set age group. So, for example, if I said, I'm only going to offer retirement information, planning, thinking about it, emotional well-being to people who are 65 and over, that could inadvertently be a form of discrimination. We should start encouraging people this is going to be a little controversial. So I hope our listeners will think about this and go, what? Did she say that? We should start encouraging people to think about retirement in a good way.
Yeah.
Right from the time they start a job.
Yeah.
What do we teach people in strategy? As a business professor, I always taught people, you begin with the end in mind. What is it you're trying to achieve? What if we welcomed people into an organization, not with a set end date in mind, but with an understanding that there is a cycle that will be experienced. And we're not afraid as we welcome people in and joining our organization, whether they're whichever generation, X, millennial, Z, whatever they're in, if we do talk about the end throughout their employment experience with us, again, without enforcing an end date.
My first employer straight out of university, they did that and I went. So I've been diligently ever since contributing to my RRSPs, etc. And a lot because it was that employer offered that kind of perspective. And I thought that was important. You talked about ageism. How do we, and you've already talked about this a bit already, but how do we normalize this conversation about retirement without giving our older employees the sensation that they're being pushed out the door?
So one way to do that, of course, is to offer information to all age groups.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way. You certainly don't say, well, we're targeting people in their 50s or their 60s for this information. Now, I appreciate there's different information and planning that has to be done at different ages and stages, but it would be interesting to offer to all employees. So that's one way around it. The other way is just in our approach. I find so many of my clients, when they're offering, again, typically financial planning seminars to employees, it's very bland, very matter of fact, very, you should be planning for your retirement. We want to assist you with that. Here's some financial experts that we brought in. Here's the link to some resources. What if the tone changed even? Just the excitement about this. We appreciate that one day you envision retiring and living a different life. We want to assist you to fulfill that dream. Just the words I'm using, right, have changed the tone of how I'm offering an opportunity.
It's also, with retention being so top of mind for so many employers, that I can see how that encourages an employee to think about, working with somebody a little bit longer. Right?
Absolutely. As I shared with you earlier, this isn't just a nice to have. This makes good business sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's something else you said in there that you know what? Okay, I'm just sort of dropping this one on you, but what about EFAPs? I know that a lot. Well, they already do the emotional component, right? And it's not necessarily related to retirement. And I know some of them, at the very least, offer some financial support. And what was the third piece? What are you going to do with your
physical health?
Physical health. Why couldn't that be part of your EFAP?
And there's no reason that it can't, as long as employees understand that that is being offered.
Yes.
There's still some hesitancy around the confidentiality of an EFAP. The other thing with that, Andrea, I would also say if you start to offer that, and that's the sole mechanism to access those types of resources, there's almost an umbrella of shame and secrecy around it. Now, EFAPs tend to be for people to access when they need assistance, and I think these programs are super racist, and they're absolutely needed. But if you put things under an EFAP umbrella, there's that tendency to think of it as crisis management. There's something wrong with me. I'm looking for help. It's a potential issue. Again, it's the wording used, what's offering. The other issue becomes we don't feel comfortable talking about this, because I always encourage employees, when you need to access it, please use the EFAP program. That's what it's there for. It is confidential, it's accessible, it's helpful, but there's still stigma around it. So that's my concern if we put these types of resources under that umbrella.
Hey, business owners, executive directors, are people stresses or challenges getting in your way? Imagine managing your people issues smoothly, addressing, better yet, dealing with employee problems before they're ever a big problem, adapting to all the changes in employee rules, and doing all of this easily. I can deal with your HR challenges so they're resolved. With me, you'll get the right things done, build a strong team, and create a workplace where the right people want to be. Your business deserves to thrive without a a lot of HR hassle. I'm here to help you make that happen. With my assistance, you can focus on business growth, supported by a strong team. Take a first step towards a better business today. Reach out and let's chat. Visit thehrhub.ca and let's begin transforming your people challenges.
What about transitional programs? In the context of, so I'm working full time and I just want to transition out of the organization. I don't want a hard stop. Can you talk about the challenges of doing that and how you could approach it in any case?
So certainly my experience in academia, I didn't do this, but a lot of my colleagues do transitional retirement. It's called phased retirement. I've spoken to clients that are implementing this in their organization. So the first thing is logistics and how to operationalize it. We don't want to turn this into a legal beagle session, but there are certain legal aspects you have to make sure you dotted your I's and crossed your T's, that, people understand what benefits do and do continue. What are their hours? What are their expectations? Who's covering benefits costs? Like, there's a lot of administrative around. So there's some important planning. Beyond that, though, what's important is that people throughout the organization understand that, hypothetically, if somebody's going to work 2 or 3 days a week for the next year as they transition, they're still there and they're still valued and they're still a resource. I've heard there's sometimes a tendency when somebody's transitioning that people treat them as out the door before they're out the door. So you have to be careful of that, right? And that people understand that there's value and purpose. And again, our theme today is today's chat is brought to you by communication. is that understanding what it is we're trying to achieve, what are we doing, and how are we telling all employees, not just the transitioning employee, the purpose and how it's being operationalized, so that people understand, oh, this is great. This is what the person's doing. This is how we're capturing their human capital before they're out the door. There's so much value in that too, right? When there's a solid plan so that someone isn't just, in 2 weeks they're gone or in a month they're gone and yikes, we didn't prepare for it. Like, what a win-win opportunity.
But I'm thinking though, as you talk about, and as I sort of the words come out of my mouth is, man, there's going to be a lot of people who want that opportunity. They want the opportunity to work 3 days a week, not tied to an end date. They just, I don't know, maybe a mom wants to, be there when her kids are young or.
Right. So that's a whole topic for a different, podcast, because that whole thing about phased work, hybrid work, all those things, flexible working conditions. What we're talking about here, though, is a specific strategic plan of transitioning someone towards a full retirement end date. So that can be very much operationalized and planned. So it should have an end date. In this case, you're doing something with a clear purpose and a clear conclusion.
Oh, and why should it have an end date? Does it have to have an end date?
Yeah, if you're doing it as phased retirement, it should have an end date. Because
okay, but sorry, now I'm getting excited. But what about if that is your retirement plan? You want to keep working, because likely, like you're going on to other things, but maybe you want to keep working at the job you've held for the last 5 years. You just don't want to do it all the time. You want to do it less. And so in that case, there really isn't an end date. It's just, I want to work less as I move into retirement.
Right. So then I wouldn't call it phased retirement. I know I'm being technical here. I would just call that flexible work hours, flexible work arrangement. Phased retirement is very specific because you're doing something differently with a specific end date in mind. So for example, if I just said, I'm 62, I'm tired of working 5 days a week. If it works and I can come to an agreement with my employer, we go, yeah, let's move to a 4-day work week. Done. I could be 25 and doing my MBA full time. And like you said, want the same arrangement. The difference is, now let's use the same example. I'm 62. I want to retire in a year. In that year, if I'm working 4 days a week, 3 days a week, we have really clear operational plans of what has to be achieved by that end date. How have I transferred information to employees? How have I made sure that my human capital, my knowledge capital is somehow transferred to the organization. You see how when there's a more solid end date, there's a difference in the approach. I'm not saying that both aren't possible, but today we were talking about transition to retirement.
When you talk about that, how can you ensure that their human capital remains in the organization? I think I've done some things with AI, and I think that AI is going to be very, very helpful there. And it doesn't even require a whole lot of skill, but that is also a topic for another episode. What about in a unionized context?
Yeah, so I would always advise in unionized environments, right? When you're looking at the terms and conditions of an employee's work, yeah, you could bring that up, bring that to the bargaining table, discuss. Of course, if it's not in the collective agreement, well, then it's residual management rights and they can deal with it, right? We have to be careful of that while still adhering to the proper Employment Standards Act. So, there's complexities. I always advise people, yeah, you should get some legal expertise in this if you're going to put something in place. But unions aren't necessarily opposed to this. In fact, if they're involved from the beginning and they're understanding and they have their input into how this can be implemented, it can be a very, very positive thing. The other thing, too, that I found when dealing with unions is I've helped put together what I'm going to call an alumni program. And unions get involved with that so that people, as they leave an organization and retire, there's still opportunities for them to gather as an alumni group and retirees, and the conversations, the support that the organization provides, whether it's once a year, a couple of times a year, to bring them together and for social activities. You're honoring those that have helped create the conditions that allow current employees to work. The other thing you do is often retirees can come back and do presentations to employees. This is where I went. This is what I'd like to share my travel adventures with you. This is what I'm doing in my retirement. Win-win all over the place again. Employees get to see, wow, this organization still respects people even after they've left. Wow, look at what these people are doing. They're enjoying life after being an employee at company XYZ. Couldn't think about what it does to your employee brand.
Okay, all right. Final question, as usual. Where can someone learn about retirement planning programs that maybe they can bring into their organizations? Like, what would you suggest?
So I love what you've addressed already, Andrea. If you have one, of course, contact your EFAP. They will often have great resources or also know experts in the local and even national community. This is going to sound very cliche, but YouTube, I know for myself, I think I've shared with you, Andrea, as I was preparing to leave my permanent full-time role and enjoying my reinvention and reimagining. Even I, who initially, a few years ago, finished an undergraduate degree with a focus in finance, and I've done my MBA, and I look at all these things that I knew very little about retirement planning. So I'll share with you and our wonderful listeners that I watched over 200 hours on the weekends of YouTube videos. There's some great retirement planning books. I found YouTube experts and I looked into their qualifications and made sure that they were legit, legit, so I could quit. And yeah, they were great. And I learned a lot. 200 hours, though, of things I had never thought of. I am thrilled and pleased that there are also resources. A lot of these financial planners are now talking about the physical health issues as well as the mental and emotional health issues. So there are resources out there.
Well, thanks, Melanie. As some of our employees transition into retirement, these are things we should consider. And it might help our brand. I also like the idea of working with partners on this, the EFAP, alumni, maybe financial planners in the community who can also help out and might be in their interest to do so. I did some awesome episodes recently around age bias, and the links to those are right here. Thanks for watching out there. We will see you next time.